Maya Torres learned to count in 2 languages before she turned 7. English came from her father's side. The bills and the overdue notices and the eviction warnings that piled up on their kitchen counter. ASL came from her mother's hands, the language of survival when words cost too much and silence was safer. By 24, Maya had become fluent in a 3rd language nobody taught in schools, the small mathematics of making it through another week. 2 shifts at Save Right Grocery on the north edge of Portland, $43 in her checking account, rent due in 6 days, and a protein bar split into thirds to last until Thursday. This is a fictional dramatized story inspired by everyday moments, the kind that happen in fluorescent-lit aisles when nobody's watching and everyone's struggling. The store smelled like disinfectant and yesterday's produce, that specific American smell of a place trying hard to be clean but never quite making it past tired. Maya stood at the end of Register 4, bagging groceries with the mechanical rhythm of someone who'd done it 7,000 times. Her hands moved without thinking. Cans on bottom, bread on top, double bag the milk, smile at the customer, even when they don't look at you, especially when they don't look at you. The afternoon shift on a Tuesday was always quiet, just the hum of refrigerator units and the occasional beep of a scanner, the soundtrack of invisible people doing invisible work. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, the same gesture her mother used to make, and reached for the next item on the belt. Diapers, formula, the small carton of whole milk with the yellow label. Her fingers paused for half a second, recognition flickering. She'd bought that same carton last month when her neighbor's baby was sick, spent $11 she didn't have because some things matter more than math. The woman placing items on the belt was young, maybe younger than Maya, with that particular kind of exhaustion that comes from loving someone who needs you every single minute. Dark circles under her eyes, a stain on her shoulder that looked like spit up, hands that trembled slightly as she unloaded her cart. If you're drawn to stories where the quietest voices carry the most power, stay with me. There's more to come. The baby strapped to the woman's chest was maybe 4 months old, tiny fists curled against a faded onesie, making those small sounds babies make when they're starting to get hungry. The woman's fingers moved through her wallet, counting bills with the focused intensity of someone who already knows the number won't be enough. Maya had been there, was still there most weeks. She started bagging slower, giving the woman time, pretending not to notice the way her shoulders had started to tighten. Behind her, Maya heard footsteps, the distinctive sound of expensive shoes on cheap linoleum. Someone joined the line. She didn't look up. Tuesday afternoons didn't usually bring in the expensive shoe crowd. Most people shopping at Save Right wore sneakers with worn soles and jackets from 3 seasons ago. The store wasn't in the nice part of Portland. It was in the part where working 2 jobs meant you might make rent, and working 1 job meant you definitely wouldn't. 4763, the cashier announced. Her name tag said Brenda, and she'd been working there since before Maya was born, with the particular bitterness of someone who'd watched 30 years disappear into a polyester vest and a name tag. The young mother's face did something subtle, a micro-expression Maya had learned to read from watching her own mother navigate a world built for hearing people. It was the look of someone doing rapid calculations, trying to figure out what to sacrifice. The baby made another sound, louder this time, and the woman glanced down at the formula, then at the milk, then at her wallet. Her hands moved to her purse, pulling out a WIC voucher with the careful shame of someone who'd been made to feel small for needing help. Brenda's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. WIC doesn't cover that brand of formula. You'll need to get the store brand. The young mother's lips moved. No sound came out. She tried again, and Maya's breath caught. She recognized that specific frustration, the way the woman's hands started to rise and then stopped, uncertainty crossing her face. The woman pointed to her ears, shook her head, then gestured toward the formula, the question clear even without words. Brenda's jaw tightened. I don't have time for this. There's a line. Get the right formula or put it back. The person in the expensive shoes moved slightly, and Maya felt rather than saw the shift in attention. Someone was watching. The young mother's face flushed red, that particular shade of humiliation that comes from being made to feel like a problem in public. Her hands trembled harder now as she reached for the formula, ready to put it back. and Maya watched her eyes land on the milk, the cheapest carton, less than $3. The baby's only source of nutrition if the formula was gone. The woman's fingers hovered over the milk carton. She picked it up, put it back on the belt, picked it up again. The baby started to cry, that newborn cry that sounds like the end of the world to everyone except the people who've decided not to care. Maya's throat tightened. She'd watched her mother make these exact calculations, watched her choose between her medication and Maya's school supplies, watched her hands shake with the same exhausted mathematics of not enough. "Ma'am, I need you to make a decision." Brenda's voice carried across the checkout lane, loud enough that other shoppers turned to look. "Either get the right products or clear out. You're holding up the line." The young mother's shoulders curved inward, her whole body trying to take up less space, and Maya watched her carefully place the milk back on the belt, then reach for the formula to put it back too. She was going to leave with nothing, walk out of the store with a hungry baby and empty hands because the math didn't work and nobody was going to help her solve it. The baby's cries got louder and people were definitely staring now, some with pity, most with irritation, all of them looking at this young, deaf mother like she was an inconvenience instead of a person. Maya's hands moved before her brain caught up. Her fingers rose into the air, forming shapes her mother had taught her 20 years ago. The first sign was simple, just a gesture to get attention, and the young mother's eyes snapped to Maya's hands like she'd heard her name called in a crowded room. Maya signed again, slower this time, asking if she was okay, if she needed help, her hands fluid and certain in the language of people who'd been invisible their whole lives. The young mother's face crumbled. Her own hands came up, shaking but forming words, explaining that she didn't have enough money, that the formula was the wrong kind, that she didn't know what to do. The man in the expensive shoes moved again, closer this time, and Maya still didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the young mother, kept signing, asking what the baby needed, learning that his name was James, that he was 4.5 months old, that his mother's name was Sophie, that she'd been trying to make the WIC voucher work but the rules kept changing and nobody at the store would slow down enough to help her figure it out. Sophie's hands moved faster as she explained, the relief of being understood flooding through her, and Maya signed back that it was okay, that she would help, that Sophie wasn't alone. "What is this?" Brenda's voice cut through. "We don't have time for whatever this is. Other customers are waiting." Maya finally looked at her, met her eyes with the quiet steel her mother had taught her. "She's deaf. She can't hear you, and she's trying to feed her baby. Well, she should have brought someone who can help her shop." The words landed like stones. Maya watched Sophie's face register the tone if not the words, watched her start to gather her things to leave, watched her hands move to sign an apology to Maya. Sorry for the trouble. Sorry for existing. Sorry for needing help. Maya had seen her mother make that same apology 1,000 times to people who couldn't even understand it. "Wait!" The voice came from behind Maya, and this time she turned to look at the man in the expensive shoes. He was tall, maybe late 30s, with dark hair going silver at the temples and eyes that were doing something she hadn't expected. They weren't looking at Sophie with pity or irritation. They were angry, not at Sophie, at the situation, at Brenda. His jaw was tight, one hand gripping his shopping basket like he was trying very hard not to drop it and do something else with his hands instead. He stepped forward, set his basket down on the adjacent register, and turned to Sophie. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "What does she need?" Maya translated into ASL, her hands asking Sophie to explain again, and Sophie signed back, hesitant at first, then faster when she realized this stranger was actually listening. Maya watched the signs, then turned to the man. "She needs the store brand formula, the one that's WIC approved, and the milk, but she's $3 short after the WIC voucher goes through and she doesn't have it." $3? He repeated it like he was testing the weight of the words. His hand went to his wallet, but Maya held up her hand. "It's not just that," she said quietly. "The formula is on the wrong shelf. The WIC-approved one is on the bottom, but it's not labeled clearly, and nobody told her. She's been coming here for weeks, getting the wrong one, having to put it back, Every time. Maya glanced at Brenda. Every time she gets treated like she's the problem instead of the signage being terrible. The man's expression shifted. Something cold moved behind his eyes, the kind of cold that came with authority and power, and the willingness to use both. How long has this been happening? Sophie's hands moved and Maya translated. 3 weeks. She's tried 4 times. Each time someone makes her feel like she's stupid or wasting their time. Twice she left without anything because she couldn't figure out which product was right, and nobody would help her. The baby's crying had subsided to hiccuping whimpers, and Sophie was rocking him gently, her face still flushed with shame. The man looked at her for a long moment, then at the formula on the belt, then at Brenda, whose expression had gone carefully neutral. "I'll cover it," he said simply. "All of it. And I'd like to speak to your manager." Brenda's neutrality cracked. "Sir, that's not necessary. I was just doing my job. Your job is to help customers, not humiliate them." His voice stayed quiet, but something in it made Brenda step back. "Manager. Now, have you ever watched someone with power choose to use it the right way? Have you ever seen someone step into a moment when they could have just walked away? Drop a comment if you've ever witnessed a small act of protection that changed everything. Type, 'I have seen kindness win.'" The manager arrived within 90 seconds. A thin man named Derek, whose eyes went wide when he saw the man in the expensive shoes. "Mr. Brennan," Derek said, and Maya's stomach dropped. "Mr. Brennan, as in Alex Brennan, as in the CEO of Pac North Holdings, the venture capital firm that owned about 40% of the retail stores in the Pacific Northwest, including the chain that owned SaveRight." Maya had seen his face on the cover of Portland Business Monthly in the break room last month, some article about ethical investing and corporate responsibility that everyone had rolled their eyes at, because corporate responsibility didn't pay for grocery store workers' health insurance. Alex Brennan looked at Derek with the expression of someone who'd just discovered something deeply disappointing in a place he'd thought was better. "Derek, walk me through your store's accessibility policy for deaf customers." Derek's mouth opened, closed. You don't have one." Alex's voice was still quiet, dangerously quiet. "You have a store in a diverse neighborhood, you accept WIC vouchers, and you don't have a single accommodation for non-hearing customers. No visual alerts, no clear signage indicating which products are WIC approved, no staff trained in basic ASL or even basic courtesy." He gestured to Sophie, who was watching with wide eyes, not understanding the words, but reading the body language perfectly. "This woman has been coming here for weeks, and every single time she's been made to feel like a burden instead of a customer, instead of a mother trying to feed her child." Maya's hands were still, but her heart wasn't. She watched Alex Brennan dismantle the situation with surgical precision, his anger controlled but absolute, and something in her chest tightened. This wasn't performative. He wasn't doing this because people were watching. He was doing it because it was right, and because he had the power to make it right, and because he'd chosen to be in this grocery store line on a Tuesday afternoon instead of wherever people like him usually were. "I want a full accessibility audit of this store by Friday," Alex continued. "Visual alerts, clear WIC signage, and at least 2 staff members trained in basic ASL. I want a formal apology to this customer, and I want her groceries covered for the next 6 months. Every visit, full coverage." He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, and handed it to Derek. "Send me the audit results and the training plan. If I don't see them by Friday at 5, I'll be back in person. And I won't be happy." Derek's face had gone pale. "Yes, sir. Of course. Right away." Alex turned to Maya, and for the first time, she saw his expression soften. "Can you tell her what I just said?" Maya's hands moved through the translation, and she watched Sophie's face transform. Confusion to understanding to disbelief to tears, the good kind, the kind that came from being seen when you thought you were invisible. Sophie signed "thank you" over and over, the sign hitting her chin repeatedly with emphasis, and then she signed something else, asking Maya to translate. "She wants to know why," Maya said quietly. "Why you're helping her." Alex looked at Sophie directly when he answered. Because she shouldn't have to fight this hard to feed her baby. Because this should have been handled the first time she walked in. Because we can do better. He paused. Tell her I'm sorry this happened. Tell her she's not a burden. Tell her she's valued here, and if anyone ever treats her like this again, she should call that number on the card I gave your manager. Someone will handle it. Maya translated, her hand steady even though her throat wasn't. Sophie was fully crying now, and baby James had fallen asleep against her chest, milk-drunk and peaceful. Alex paid for Sophie's groceries himself, all of them, plus the formula and the milk and the diapers, and then he added another $100 in store credit to her account. He did it quietly, without fanfare, and when Sophie tried to thank him again, he just shook his head and signed one word. Maya's breath caught. His signing was clumsy, unpracticed, but the word was clear. Family. Sophie left with her groceries and her baby, and her dignity intact, and the store had gone completely silent. Every customer in every line was watching, and Brenda had disappeared to the back. Derek was already on his phone, presumably calling corporate, and Alex Brennan stood at the register with his own basket of groceries, which Maya noticed for the first time contained bread, eggs, coffee, and a single frozen meal. The groceries of someone who lived alone and worked too much. Human groceries. Thank you, he said to Maya as she bagged his items, for helping her, for stepping in. Maya's hands moved automatically, bread on top, eggs cushioned by the bread bag. I didn't do anything special. You spoke her language. You saw her. That's not nothing. He paused, studying her face like he was trying to figure something out. How long have you known ASL? My whole life. My mother is deaf. Maya handed him his bag, their fingers brushing for a second, and she felt the calluses on his hands. Not soft office hands. He worked with them somehow. She taught me that silence doesn't mean invisible. It just means people aren't listening right. Something in his expression shifted, went soft around the edges. That's a good lesson. He took the bag but didn't leave. What's your name? Maya. Maya Torres. Maya. He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. I'm Alex. I know, she said, then immediately regretted it, because it sounded like she'd been paying attention, which she had, which made it worse. I mean, Derek said your name, and you're kind of in the news sometimes. His mouth quirked. The boring business news that nobody reads. I read it. We get Portland Business Monthly in the break room. She was definitely talking too much now. Definitely making this weird, but he was smiling, and it was a real smile, not the corporate kind. The article about ethical investing was interesting. You actually read that? He looked genuinely surprised. Most people see my face on a magazine and think, great, another rich guy with opinions about money. I thought that too, Maya admitted. But then you did this, so maybe the article wasn't completely full of it. He laughed, a real laugh that crinkled his eyes. High praise. He pulled out another business card, wrote something on the back, and handed it to her. If you ever need anything, or if you see something like this happening again, and you need someone to make calls, that's my direct line. Use it. Maya took the card, felt the expensive weight of it. She should have said something smooth, something clever, but her brain had short-circuited somewhere around the moment he'd learned to sign an ASL just to communicate with Sophie. Okay, was all she managed. He left, and Maya stood there holding his business card with the entire checkout line still staring at her. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of whispers and glances, but Maya barely noticed. She kept thinking about the way Alex Brennan had looked at Sophie like she mattered, the way he'd gotten angry on behalf of someone he'd never met, the way he'd asked Maya's name like it was important. The next morning, Maya arrived for her shift to find Derek in a full panic. 3 people in suits standing in the store with clipboards and measuring tapes, and a woman from corporate installing new signage that had clear visual indicators for WIC-approved products. The accessibility audit wasn't waiting until Friday. It was happening now. Within 2 hours, the store had been transformed. Visual alerts on the PA system. Clear signage. New training materials delivered to every employee. Brenda was conspicuously absent, and Derek pulled Maya aside during her break with an expression that oscillated between grateful and terrified. Mr. Brennan called corporate last night, Derek said. Apparently this store is going to be the pilot location for a full accessibility program. They want you to help train the staff in basic ASL. Paid training hours, $15 more per session. Maya's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth, liquid rippling from the sudden freeze. What? He specifically requested you. Said you demonstrated the exact kind of customer care we should be modeling. Derek shifted his weight. This could be really good for you. For all of us. He's going to be checking in on the implementation. Maya's brain tried to process this information and failed. She was a grocery bagger making $13.50 an hour who'd just been tapped to train her co-workers because a CEO had watched her sign ASL to a struggling mother. Nothing about this made sense. Everything about this made her chest feel tight and warm and terrified. She started the training sessions that week, showed her co-workers the basics. Hello, thank you, help, sorry, numbers, common grocery items. Most of them were bored or resentful, forced to attend by corporate mandate, but a few were genuinely interested. Carmen from the deli practiced her signs during slow periods. Robert from produce started keeping a laminated sheet of common signs near his station. Slowly, awkwardly, Save Right became a place where Sophie could shop without fear, where the staff would at least try, where the silence of non-hearing customers wasn't met with impatience but with effort. Alex Brennan came back on Thursday. Maya saw him enter through the automatic doors. Same expensive shoes, same quiet authority. But this time he was carrying a tablet and walking with a woman in a corporate suit who was clearly giving him a tour of the changes. He listened, nodded, made notes, and then his eyes found Maya at Register 4. He said something to the woman, who nodded and walked away, and then he crossed the store to Maya's lane. "How's it going?" he asked. Maya's hands were shaking slightly as she scanned a customer's cereal. "Good. The training is good. People are trying. I heard you're a natural teacher." He waited while she finished with the customer, then stepped closer. "I also heard the staff actually respects you, which is rare for mandated training. I just showed them signs. It's not complicated. It is if nobody's ever bothered to learn before." He paused, and Maya noticed he was holding a coffee cup from the expensive place downtown, the kind that cost $7. He set it on the counter. "For you. I noticed you drink it black with 2 sugars. Seemed like a safe bet." Maya stared at the cup, at him, at the cup again. "You brought me coffee." "I brought someone coffee who's making a real difference. Don't read too much into it." But his smile said she could absolutely read into it if she wanted to. "I'm doing a full assessment of all our retail locations, making sure they're actually accessible, not just technically compliant. I was wondering if you'd be willing to consult. Same pay rate as the training sessions, but it would be visiting different stores, reviewing their setups, giving recommendations. It would be contract work, flexible hours. You could keep this job if you wanted, or..." He trailed off, and Maya's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. Or I have a position opening up in my office. Community outreach coordinator. It would involve a lot of what you're doing now, but on a larger scale, working with our portfolio companies to implement real accessibility measures, making sure people like Sophie don't fall through the cracks. He met her eyes. "I think you'd be extraordinary at it. But it's your choice. No pressure. Think about it." Maya's brain was screaming that people like her didn't get offers like this, that there had to be a catch, that this was too good and too fast and too much. But her heart was remembering the way he'd stood up for Sophie, the way he'd called Derek out, the way he'd learned a sign in ASL just to communicate respect. Her heart was noticing that he'd brought her coffee the way she liked it, which meant he'd been paying attention when he didn't have to. "I'll think about it," she managed. "Good." He slid another business card across the counter, this one with an email address written on the back. "Send me your answer when you're ready. No deadline." "And Maya?" "Yeah?" "That thing your mother taught you, about silence not meaning invisible. You've been proving that your whole life. This is just other people finally catching up." He picked up his tablet. "I'll see you around." He left, And Maya stood there holding a $7 coffee and a job offer that could change her entire trajectory, and she realized with a sudden, sharp clarity that this was what it felt like when someone saw you, really saw you, not your struggle, not your limitations, not your invisibility, just you and the specific shape of your competence, and the way you used silence as a language instead of a barrier. 2 weeks later, Maya gave her notice at SaveRight, took the job, started working in an office with windows that overlooked the river, coordinating accessibility programs for 47 retail locations across 3 states. Started having meetings with executives who actually listened when she talked. Started getting emails from store managers asking for her guidance, her expertise, her opinion. Started mattering in a way that came with a salary and health insurance and the kind of stability her mother had never had. And every Friday, Alex Brennan had a standing meeting with her to review progress, which was definitely professional and necessary, and not at all an excuse to spend an hour talking to her while drinking coffee from the place downtown that knew both their orders by heart. They talked about accessibility standards and training metrics and budget allocations, and sometimes they talked about other things. His sister, who was hard of hearing and had inspired his interest in accessibility years before he'd had the power to do anything about it. Her mother, who'd recently gotten a cochlear implant but still preferred ASL because it was her first language, her true language. The way silence could be a choice instead of an isolation. 6 months in, Alex asked Maya to dinner. Not a work dinner, an actual dinner. The kind where you dress up and the restaurant has cloth napkins and afterwards you walk along the waterfront talking about nothing and everything until the city lights blur together. They went slow, careful, building something on a foundation of respect and trust instead of rush and attraction. Maya learned that Alex had been coming to SaveRight that Tuesday because it was his grandmother's favorite store, because she'd lived in that neighborhood for 40 years before she passed, because he'd promised her he'd never forget where he came from, even when he was signing contracts in boardrooms. Maya learned that the calluses on his hands came from woodworking, a hobby he'd picked up after his divorce 3 years ago, a way to make something tangible when his work felt too abstract. She learned that he was awkward and earnest and genuinely committed to using his power and money to fix broken systems instead of just benefiting from them. She learned that he'd noticed her months before that day at SaveRight, had seen her signing to an elderly customer during a previous visit, had remembered her face and wondered about her story. "I wasn't being noble that day," he admitted one night over takeout in his apartment, surrounded by half-finished chairs and the smell of sawdust. "I was being selfish. I saw you helping Sophie, and I thought, that's the kind of person I want in my life. Someone who sees people. Someone who helps without thinking about what they'll get back. Someone like you." Maya's hands moved through a response in ASL, the language of her heart, and Alex's eyes tracked the signs he'd been learning, understanding enough to know she was saying, "You saw me first." They built something quiet and strong, a relationship based on mutual respect and shared purpose, and the understanding that love didn't have to be loud to be real. Alex integrated more ASL into his life, took formal classes, learned to sign well enough that Maya's mother approved of him, which was saying something. Maya's career expanded, her programs becoming the model for accessible retail across the Northwest, her name appearing in the same business publications that had once featured Alex's face. She spoke at conferences, trained executives, changed policies, made the invisible visible, one store at a time. A year later, Sophie came back to SaveRight with baby James, who was walking now and signing milk with chubby toddler hands. The store was different, brighter, more welcoming. Staff members greeted Sophie in ASL, helped her find what she needed, treated her like the valued customer she'd always been but had never been acknowledged as. Sophie found Maya in the aisles during a visit, signing her gratitude, explaining that she'd gotten a job, that things were better, that she'd never forgotten what Maya and Alex had done. Maya signed back, "You did this. You kept showing up. You kept trying. We just removed the barriers." But Sophie shook her head, smiled, and signed one more thing before she left. You saw me when I was invisible. That changed everything. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe. Tomorrow I'll share another moment where the quietest choice became the loudest truth. Because some people don't need a voice to change the world. They just need someone willing to listen to their silence and understand that it's been speaking all along.